In 346 BC, as the simmering tensions between Athens and Macedon reached a boiling point, a treaty was struck that would alter the course of Greek history. For nearly a decade, Athens had been mired in a complex web of warfare, not only contending with Macedon over the prized city of Amphipolis, but also embroiled in the Third Sacred War, a conflict that pitted old alliances against emerging ambitions. The Peace of Philocrates was not simply an end to hostilities. It was a carefully crafted maneuver in which Philip II of Macedon demonstrated both his military prowess and his diplomatic finesse. For 10 long years, two parallel wars had shaped the Greek landscape. In central Greece, the Third Sacred War had erupted over religious and territorial disputes, drawing in Athens, Sparta, and their allies against Thebes, Boeotia, and Thessaly. This conflict, fought in the rugged regions of Boeotia, Phocis, and Thessaly, was as much about the control of sacred sites and the legitimacy of religious institutions as it was about power. In the north, a separate but interconnected struggle had been unfolding since Philip's audacious capture of Amphipolis, a city that Athens held dear not only for its strategic location, but also for its symbolic importance as a protector of Athenian influence in the region. The events leading up to the treaty were marked by cautious overtures and missed opportunities. In the summer of 347 BC, Philip sent out peace feelers, an indication that he was eager to stabilize the situation in Greece and secure his southern flank. At the same time, the Athenian politician after whom the treaty was named, Philocrates, put forward a proposal for a reciprocal exchange of envoys, a suggestion that initially held promise for a peaceful resolution. However, these early gestures of conciliation quickly gave way to more ambitious, if ultimately unsuccessful, efforts by Athens to forge an anti-Macedonian alliance. Athens reached out not only to traditional allies but also to new partners in the hope of creating a broad coalition against the rising power in the north. Despite these attempts, the alliance never coalesced into a force capable of matching Macedon's might. The internal dynamics within Athens were as complex as the external conflicts. Political factions debated the best course of action, while the city's leaders weighed the potential costs of continued warfare against the uncertain benefits of a negotiated settlement. Meanwhile, in Phocis, a parallel political drama was unfolding. Philocrates, the leader who had once commanded the region, had been deposed, only for his rivals to later offer Athens and Sparta the strategic fortresses that guarded the narrow pass at Thermopylae, a key defensive position. This offer, however, was wrapped in its own set of complications as the fortunes of war shifted rapidly. When news arrived early in 346 BC that Philocrates had been restored as leader in Phocis, and that Philip was willing to release captives held since the conflict at Olynthus, the Athenians saw a new opening. The prospect of reconciliation, combined with the tangible benefits on the table, convinced Athens to initiate formal peace negotiations. 10 envoys, among them the young and tenacious Demosthenes, were dispatched to Pella, the heart of Macedon. There in the halls of Philip's court, the stage was set for a delicate exchange of proposals and counter-proposals. Philip's strategy was one of calculated generosity. He promised that during the ongoing peace talks he would refrain from attacking Athenian allies in the Chersonese, a crucial concession aimed at preserving Athenian influence in the region. He further offered to return the prisoners from Olynthus without demanding the heavy ransom that had been customary in earlier conflicts, a move designed to demonstrate both his goodwill and his power to act unilaterally. Additional assurances were provided in the form of support for Athens' position on Euboea, and even an offer to repopulate the towns of Thespi and Plataea, both of which had suffered destruction at the hands of Thebes. In return, however, Philip reserved the right to deal with Phocis as he saw fit, a clear signal that his ambitions in central Greece were not to be curtailed. The envoys from Athens left Pella with the impression that Philip's terms were not only generous but also strategically sound. Yet the negotiations were far from straightforward. As Philip moved eastward, defeating Cersobops in eastern Thrace, the Athenian envoys found themselves in a precarious position. The peace process took an unexpected turn when the envoys, instead of being allowed to return home immediately, were compelled to accompany Philip as he marched south. This development underscored Philip's intent to maintain a close watch on Athenian reactions and to ensure that his commitments were understood within the broader context of his military campaigns. Back in Athens, the atmosphere was charged with both anticipation and anxiety. The negotiations had shifted from Pella to the Athenian assembly, where Philip's envoys presented their proposals for debate. The city's leaders found themselves divided between two courses of action. One faction argued for waiting until the envoys who had been dispatched in the previous year returned with their own insights, while another demanded a comprehensive common peace that would include all Greeks in a united front against further conflict. Philip's senior envoy Antipater made it clear that the Macedonian vision did not accommodate a Panhellenic alliance. The message was unambiguous. Athens had a simple choice: to accept the terms as they were offered, or to face the possibility of fighting an enemy who was increasingly consolidating power. The decision was agonizing. Athens was caught between a desire to maintain its historical independence and the stark reality that continued resistance might only lead to further bloodshed and humiliation. Ultimately, the Athenian assembly chose the pragmatic route of accepting peace on Philip's terms, even if it meant excluding traditional allies such as Phocis and Cersobops from the resulting treaty. In a move that would haunt Athenian politics for years to come, the decision was made against the backdrop of internal dissent and external uncertainty. As the envoys returned to Pella with the treaty in hand, they were met with a further twist in the unfolding drama. Philip, ever the master strategist, refused to let the envoys depart without his personal escort. He insisted that they accompany him on his march, ensuring that the peace was not merely a set of promises written on papyrus but a binding part of his military campaign. It was during this journey that Demosthenes, whose name would later become synonymous with passionate oratory against Macedonian dominance, broke ranks with his colleagues. Seizing the moment, he persuaded the Athenian assembly to reject Philip's subsequent call for troops to support a possible confrontation with Thebes. His actions underscored the deep-seated mistrust that many Athenians harbored towards Philip's overtures, a mistrust that stemmed from a long history of political maneuvering and military subterfuge. Philip's reaction to this internal dissent was measured but revealing. Rather than retaliate with force, he chose to abandon any immediate plans for a direct military confrontation with Thebes. Instead, he opted for the path of continued diplomacy, a decision that effectively left the Phocians with little choice but to submit. The leader of Phocis, recognizing the futility of further resistance, agreed to surrender the key fortress of Thermopylae to Philip and subsequently went into exile. With the Phocians disarmed and demoralized, Philip's campaign in central Greece could proceed with minimal opposition. The treaty, while bringing an end to two major conflicts, the Third Sacred War and the War for Amphipolis, was not without its lingering consequences. In Athens, many felt that the peace had come at too high a price. The promised benefits, such as the restoration of positions on Euboea and the repopulation of key cities, were either delayed or never fully realized. The sense of betrayal was compounded by the exclusion of allies who had fought alongside Athens in earlier conflicts. The bitterness over these concessions, combined with the stirring speeches of orators like Demosthenes, would fuel a growing resistance to Macedonian influence in the years that followed. At the heart of the treaty lay a dual purpose. On one hand, Philip's generous terms and flexible negotiations were designed to placate Athens and create a semblance of unity among the Greek states. On the other hand, the concessions he extracted allowed him to secure his rear before turning his attention to more ambitious projects. With the peace in place, Philip was free to leave a Thessalian garrison at Thermopylae, a strategic foothold that gave him easy access to the heart of Greece, and to signal his broader intentions of an expedition into Asia Minor. It was a calculated risk. By creating a temporary stability in Greece, he ensured that his resources and military might could be redirected towards campaigns that would eventually reshape the entire eastern Mediterranean. The legacy of the Peace of Philocrates is a study in the interplay of diplomacy and military strategy. For Philip, It was a stepping stone, a means to consolidate power at home and to focus on future conquests. His approach was emblematic of a broader shift in the nature of warfare in the ancient world. No longer was success measured solely by the outcomes of battles fought in the field. Increasingly, the art of negotiation and the ability to manipulate political alliances became key instruments of power. Philip's ability to secure a favorable treaty with a traditionally formidable opponent like Athens demonstrated that strength could be as much about what was promised as what was fought for on the battlefield. In Athens, the impact of the treaty was profound. The decision to accept peace was met with mixed emotions. On one side, the pragmatists saw it as a necessary compromise in the face of an enemy who was unlikely to be defeated through sheer force alone. On the other, there were those who viewed the concessions as a betrayal of Athenian honor and a surrender of the city's hard-won independence. The debates in the Athenian assembly were intense and bitter, reflecting the deep divisions that would only widen in the coming years. As the city grappled with the aftermath of the treaty, it became clear that the peace with Macedon was as much a temporary lull as it was a permanent solution. The diplomatic maneuverings surrounding the treaty also had a ripple effect on the wider Greek world. Thebes, which had once been an ally of Macedon during the Sacred War, found itself increasingly isolated. The actions taken by Athens in accepting peace on terms that seemed to favor Philip did little to assuage Theban suspicions. In fact, the resulting mistrust would later contribute to a series of conflicts that culminated in one of the most decisive battles of the ancient world, the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BC. At Chaeronea, Philip's forces would crush the allied armies of several Greek city-states, a victory that not only confirmed his dominance over Greece, but also set the stage for the eventual rise of his son, Alexander the Great. Even as the Peace of Philocrates brought an end to immediate hostilities, it left behind a legacy of unresolved tensions and unfulfilled promises. In the months and years that followed, Demosthenes and other Athenian statesmen would continue to vociferously criticize the treaty, arguing that its concessions had undermined Athens' strategic position. Their speeches, full of impassioned rhetoric, captured the spirit of a city struggling to reconcile its illustrious past with the harsh realities of a new geopolitical order. For many Athenians, the peace was a temporary reprieve, a postponement of the inevitable clash between the old order of independent Greek city-states and the emerging imperial power of Macedon. Philip's own ambitions, however, were not confined to the stabilization of Greece. The peace allowed him to focus on a grander vision, one that extended far beyond the Hellenic world. With Greece temporarily pacified, he began to hint at future military campaigns aimed at expanding Macedon's influence into Asia Minor. This ambition would later be realized in the form of vast conquests under his son, whose campaigns spread Greek culture and ideas throughout the known world. In this sense, the Peace of Philocrates can be seen as a precursor to the Hellenistic era, a period in which the blending of cultures and the exchange of ideas would transform the ancient world. Throughout the negotiations and the subsequent fallout, the human element was ever present. The envoys who traveled to Pella, the assembly members who debated late into the night, and the citizens who witnessed the unfolding drama all played a part in a story of power, pride, and perseverance. Their experiences remind us that history is not merely a series of abstract events, but a tapestry woven from the lives and decisions of individuals. The treaty, with all its promises and compromises, was a reflection of the complexities of the human condition, a mixture of hope, ambition, and the sometimes painful necessity of compromise. As the years passed, the impact of the Peace of Philocrates continued to be felt across the Greek world. Its terms, though initially seen as a victory for Macedon, gradually revealed themselves to be a double-edged sword. While the treaty did secure a temporary peace and allowed Philip to consolidate his power, it also sowed the seeds of future discord. Athens, still reeling from the perceived betrayals and the loss of its influence, would eventually become a rallying point for those opposed to Macedonian hegemony. This internal strife, combined with the external pressures of a rapidly changing geopolitical landscape, ensured that the peace was never truly permanent. In reflecting on the Peace of Philocrates, one cannot help but appreciate the delicate balance between diplomacy and warfare that defined this period. Philip's success lay not only in his ability to win battles, but in his understanding of the importance of perception and the power of strategic concessions. By offering generous terms to Athens, terms that promised both immediate relief and long-term benefits, he managed to neutralize a potential adversary while simultaneously advancing his own ambitions. It was a masterclass in statecraft, one that would be studied by generations of leaders and historians alike. For Athens, the aftermath of the treaty was a period of introspection and regret. The city, which had once prided itself on its military prowess and its commitment to freedom, was forced to confront the realities of a changing world. The debates that raged in the assembly in the wake of the treaty were not simply about policy. They were a struggle to redefine what it meant to be Athenian in an era when the old paradigms of power and independence were giving way to new forms of imperial ambition. The voices of dissent, led by figures like Demosthenes, resonated deeply with a populace that was beginning to sense that the cost of peace might, in the long run, be far higher than the price paid on the negotiating table. In the final analysis, the Peace of Philocrates stands as a pivotal moment in ancient Greek history, a moment when the scales of power shifted irrevocably in favor of a rising Macedon. It was a treaty born out of necessity and sealed with a mixture of idealism and pragmatism. For Philip, it was an opportunity to reconfigure the Greek world, to bring order to a region long accustomed to chaos, and to set the stage for a future in which Macedonian influence would extend far beyond the borders of Greece. For Athens, it was a bitter lesson in the complexities of realpolitik, a reminder that even the most cherished ideals of liberty and independence can sometimes be sacrificed at the altar of survival. The story of the Peace of Philocrates is in many ways a microcosm of the larger narrative of ancient Greece, a tale of ambition, rivalry, and the inexorable march of history. It is a reminder that peace, like war, is often a matter of perspective, shaped by the competing interests of those who wield power. As we look back on these events from our modern vantage point, we are struck by the timeless nature of the dilemmas faced by the Athenians and the Macedonians alike. Their choices, made in a world where honor and pragmatism were in constant conflict, continue to offer valuable lessons about the challenges of governance, the perils of hubris, and the enduring importance of diplomacy in the face of overwhelming force. In the end, the Peace of Philocrates was more than just a cessation of hostilities. It was a turning point that set in motion a series of events leading to the eventual rise of Macedonian supremacy. It reminds us that history is rarely a simple tale of winners and losers. It is a complex interplay of strategy, personality, and circumstance. The treaty may have brought a temporary calm to a turbulent period, but it also laid the groundwork for the dramatic transformations that would soon reshape the entire Greek world, paving the way for the era of conquest and cultural fusion that followed. This episode from the annals of ancient history offers us not only a glimpse into the intricate dance of diplomacy and warfare, but also a profound reflection on the nature of power itself. The decisions made by Philip and the responses from Athens continue to resonate, challenging us to consider how leadership and compromise intersect in times of crisis. It is a story that, despite the centuries that separate us, remains as relevant today as it was in 346 BC, a testament to the enduring complexity of human affairs and the perpetual struggle to forge peace in a world defined by conflict.